As we approach the end of 2024 and come together for our final webinar of the year, I am honored to reflect on a year of significant milestones and accomplishments for the Malta Further and Higher Education Authority. Together, we have reinforced our commitment to quality education and the continuous improvement of the further and higher education sector. In January, we had the privilege of hosting the 9th ASIM Education Ministers Meeting, a prestigious gathering that brought together representatives from Asia and Europe to address key issues in education. The central theme of the ministerial meeting, Leaving No One Behind, underscored the importance of equitable and inclusive education as a cornerstone of sustainable development. Hosting this event further solidified Malta's position as a key player in fostering collaboration between Asia and Europe, demonstrating our dedication to the shared goal of ensuring that quality education is accessible to all. Earlier this year, we established the new validation unit, teamed up by a dedicated senior manager and 2 officers. This new team is set to strengthen our validation processes, advancing our mission to align qualifications with both national and international standards. In alignment with our vision to foster lifelong learning and provide accessible pathways for all learners, we initiated the revision of the Recognition of Prior Learning guidelines this year. The revised guidelines will emphasize fairness, transparency, and consistency in assessing prior learning, thereby increasing trust and credibility in the process. Our stakeholders can look forward to the draft document, which is scheduled for publication in June 2025. This milestone will mark a crucial step toward creating a robust framework that aligns with international best practices and addresses the evolving needs of Malta's further and higher education sectors. A major focus has been the implementation of recommendations from the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, what we know as ENQA. One key change is the differentiation in accreditation procedures for the further and higher education sectors. Throughout the month of September, the MFHEA provided training to all the further and higher education institutions on the new higher education provider accreditation standards. These sessions equipped providers with the knowledge to meet the updated benchmarks and ensure high-quality educational experiences for students. A standout achievement this year was hosting the ENQA's General Assembly, a prestigious event that underscored Malta's commitment to excellence in quality assurance. This gathering provided a platform to showcase our nation's proactive role in advancing educational standards while fostering meaningful dialogue among international leaders in the field. During the year 2024, we also issued the amended Quality Assurance Guidelines for both further and higher education for public consultation. These guidelines reflect our commitment to transparency, inclusivity, and continuous improvement of quality assurance practices. Finally, we successfully elected members to the Quality Assurance Committee, which will play a crucial role in guiding our quality assurance initiatives and ensuring they align with both national and international standards. Individuals with the right experience and qualifications were encouraged to apply, with opportunities available for professionals from diverse sectors, including vocational education and training, the arts, quality assurance, legal fields, and medicine. This diversity ensures a comprehensive and multidisciplinary approach to quality assurance. As we celebrate these achievements, we remain steadfast in our dedication to fostering a robust education ecosystem in Malta. These accomplishments are a testament to the hard work and collaboration of our staff, stakeholders, and international partners. Thank you all for your contributions to an exceptional year. Let us continue working together towards a brighter future for education in Malta and beyond. Wishing you all a wonderful end to the year and an inspiring and fruitful new year. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. This is the last event of MFHEA for 2024. Together with Yasmin, who is the Manager, Quality Assurance and Accreditation, today we will present this webinar, which will highlight the main events, activities of the National VET Team Project. As Dr. Kushkiri said in her introductory speech, in her welcome speech, this was an eventful year for MFHEA, and as we shall soon see, the 2024, thanks to the National VET Team Project funds, has been very, very active and full of challenges for the authority. So, we shall start by having a look at what were the main activities of 2024 of the National VET Team Project. As usual, all activities and events were coordinated by the team within the Quality Assurance, Accreditation and Validation Unit throughout the year, together with experts, with different experts that today you will have the opportunity also to, once again, meet online when they will be doing their presentations. So, these were the main events, the activities of this year. We refer to last Friday's launch of the updated Quality Assurance Online Teaching and Learning Guidelines. Those of you who have attended the workshop last Friday, we started the consultation process to update these guidelines. We were advised that since the guidelines were launched in 2021, we needed to update these quality assurance guidelines to reflect the technological and the pedagogical improvements that are going on in this important area. The world post-COVID-19 has affected also the teaching and learning, mainly in online, the introduction and the fast developments in AI and metaverse requests that we constantly update these important guidelines. So last Friday we started a consultation process. It was a one-day workshop. I would say it was very, very interesting. The guidelines, the updated guidelines will soon be published online. Also, we will publish the survey that was held in summer with providers which are offering the online teaching and learning, so that you can see the results and you understand better why it is being suggested certain changes and amendments to these guidelines. As we said last Friday, this is not a finalized document, it's just a draft, and we hope that in June 2025, following this consultation process, we will be issuing the final document. Again, no decision has been taken yet when the new guidelines will be into force. It's something that still needs to be discussed, and obviously it will be communicated later on. A very important activity and aspect of this year's National VET Team Project was the development of a quality assurance manual of procedures for VINFIL centers. In September 2022, we've launched the first guidelines for VINFIL centers. Given the rapid development in this area and the improvements that have been going on, even on a European level, we felt it was the need to issue new guidelines, new quality assurance guidelines. A consultation process, again, was held October, November. In fact, there was a workshop which was organized on the 4th of October. And we can say that today, officially now, we will be launching these guidelines. Later on, during the last part of this webinar, our experts will be launching this final document, which again will be available online. We have also hard copies for those of you who would like a hard copy, and gives an idea, a clear indication, support to our VINFIL centers. Validation of non-formal and informal learning that, again, on a European level is being promoted to encourage to be more inclusive, and also since we believe in the value of social justice. A very important aspect, again, of the national vetting project of this year was the revision of the guidelines for external quality assurance audits of further education institutions and centers. It was highlighted last year in the ENQA peer review that the authority needed to separate its procedures. Its procedures need to be more fit for purpose, and we do understand the reality of further education institutions, which are micro, and that certain standards for hire do not apply for these further education institutions, also because most of them provide VET. What we've done is that we have reviewed, studied, analyzed what is happening in other countries, in other European countries. We have analyzed the model of Hungary and Estonia in particular, also thanks to the MOU that we have with the Estonian agency. They were very much helpful and giving us advice on how these should be amended. In July, our experts, Mr. Gino Schiavone and Ms. Katalin from Hungary, VET experts, conducted a meeting, a one-day meeting, where we have gathered feedback from institutions. We have also launched the draft document consisting of the 7 different evaluation areas, we are calling them, where after we have gathered the necessary feedback, now today we will present these guidelines. These guidelines, these standards for further education institutions, meaning that these apply for institutions offering programs up to MQF level 4 only. The other institutions that offer from MQF level 1 to 8, the higher education standards apply. But today we'll be launching this manual. During the presentation that we will have after the coffee break, Mr. Schiavone will be presenting these standards. They reflect also ECAVET indicators. As I said, Malta, it's not in the sense that we need to follow also what other countries are doing, because we are in competition with other countries, and at the end of the day, these education institutions are preparing students for the needs of the economy and the labor market. It's not that we believe education is only there for the needs of the economy or the labor market. It's more than that, education, but at the end of the day, a student needs to be employable. So he needs to be equipped with the right skills. Something that we have done this year, and I must say that we have received very, very positive feedback. Now, towards the end of this webinar, I will be speaking in more detail what will be happening next year, are the professional development sessions that we have done in August, September mainly, for those VET further education institutions and also VET higher education institutions on the new standards for higher education. We had 6 different workshops. Providers were divided into 2. I think the feedback was quite positive, even from the replies that we have received. We have not only presented a theoretical lectures or presentations, but there were group work presentations and discussions with our expert. Going forward, I think that, as we always have said, particularly in the last 5 years, yes, the authority, we are here to regulate, but we are here to guide you in regulating yourselves. We believe in the enhancement of our providers, and the authority believes that whenever new guidelines or new regulations are presented, we shall provide the necessary training to our institutions. The thematic analysis report, as part of this project this year, we are today presenting, following my presentation, the main findings of a report that we will soon be publishing. As part of the European Standard Guidelines 3.4, MFHEA, because we strive to be fully compliant with ESG standards, also in view of our application for membership in ENQA and ICAR, is Standard 3.4, where we need to do this thematic analysis report. And this year, we are focusing on the strengths and weaknesses of VET higher education institutions. What we've done now, Dr. Vikas will be very soon explaining the methodology and how this was done. We took a sample of external quality assurance audits reports, and we will be presenting what are in each and every standard, according to the old standards, 11 standards of the higher education, what are the strengths and weaknesses. And this report will help now the authority to develop the quality assurance development plan post-2025. The authority has published in early 2023 this development plan. We shall finish all tasks by end of 2025, but now it's time to start thinking and preparing a development plan post-2025 for the following 3 years up till 2028. This was mainly the activities held this year. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the staff within my unit, also the staff at EUPA for their valuable support and in helping us to make these activities and this project a successful one. That was basically all the activities, the project for this year. We can now proceed to the first presentation by Dr. Giannis Vikas, who will be presenting us the main points of the thematic analysis report, the strengths and weaknesses of the higher education institutions. Dr. Vikas, good morning.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here today with you to present the outcomes of this interesting thematic analysis report. I will share my screen. I suppose I can share my screen with you, and you are able now to see it, probably, yes. So this report actually focused on a sample of 20 higher education institutions, and the point was to do a detailed analysis um, and finding the strengths of those higher educational institutions according to the quality assurance reports. So what were, let's say, the good practices that were identified for each specific standard? What were the weaknesses, or what were the areas for improvement, and also connected with weaknesses, some things related to possible recommendations. So we guess that this report will be, as it was said before, a useful report for the continuous improvement of higher education institutions. So I will start by presenting the first practice, the first standard. Actually, the first standard has to do with policy for quality assurance. So it emphasizes that institutions should have a clear, comprehensive, and publicly accessible quality assurance policy that integrates with their strategic management report. And this policy aims to promote continuous improvement, transparency, and alignment with national and international quality standards. So some of the strengths and good practices identified on the first standard. First of all, many institutions publicly share their quality assurance policies. So there is accessibility and transparency in that. There is a structured structured quality manuals and policies. So several institutions provide detailed quality assurance manuals that outline clearly their procedures and responsibilities. A third good practice and strength is the emphasis on integrity and compliance. So institutions emphasize academic integrity, anti-fraud measures, and safeguarding practices within their quality assurance frameworks, and the development of quality assurance boards, which is an important thing that allows institutions to monitor quality assurance processes and ensure a culture of continuous improvement. Some, let's say, possible weaknesses, let's say, areas for improvement, if we want to put it in another way. And the first thing, the limited stakeholder engagement, is something that we have identified also in other standards. So while some institutions implement quality assurance policies, they often lack mechanisms for more active stakeholder engagement from students, employers, alumni. Another element is the inadequate documentation on implementation and monitoring. So reports of institutions points to quality policies that, even though they are detailed, sometimes they're not so, they lack clarity or performance metrics. A third area for improvement would be to strengthen the alignment with strategic planning. So integrating quality assurance policies, integrating them actually with the strategic goals of the institution ensures that quality assurance becomes a foundational part of decision making. And another thing that we found that it is important is the dependency, like an important weakness and an area for improvement. And we have seen it that also in other standards is the dependency on key individuals, meaning that especially smaller institutions often centralize quality assurance responsibilities among few individuals, and this reliance risks continuity and consistency. So from those areas for improvement and weaknesses, there are also some relative recommendations by me when I conducted the report, but also by the committees. It's something that were highlighted by the committees that did the quality assurance report, to enhance stakeholder involvement, to refine and publicize quality assurance documentation, to strengthen the alignment with strategic planning, and also to develop consistent self-assessment practices. So regular self-assessment processes tied to clear benchmarks and supported ongoing staff training can drive continuous improvement. So these are some ideas actually to improve this some of these specific areas identified in the weaknesses. Standard number 2 has to do with institutional probity. So it focuses on ensuring institutions have robust measures and procedures to maintain institutional and financial also probity. This standard requires entities to demonstrate sound governance, compliance with legal fiscal obligations, and the effective management of resources. Some strengths and good practices identified. First of all, is we see that institutions have established clear organizational frameworks, ensuring accountability and proper delegation of responsibility. So there are sound governance structures. There is financial sustainability, especially larger institutions have demonstrated strong financial performance in resource management, with evidence also on long-term planning. There is compliance with legal standards. This is another important thing to note and positive thing. So across multiple cases, institutions were observed adhering to legal and fiscal regulations, including appropriate record keeping and compliance with the labor laws. But some of the weaknesses and areas for improvement identified here was again the overdependence on key individuals. So especially smaller institutions and newer providers often centralize decision makings among few people. So this over-reliance can pose specific risk. There was a lack of strategic financial planning, in the sense that several institutions do not adequately integrate financial strategies into broader operational plans. So there was more of a short-term approach to financial management. Weak risk management frameworks, so gaps in identifying and mitigating risks such as dependency on external funding, insufficient or not diversified revenue streams, and transparency, we could say sort of transparency in governance, in the sense that there was limited documentation on governance structures and decision-making processes. And some recommendations for the amelioration of this specific standard is to diversify revenue streams, so reduce financial dependence on a single source of financial revenues, such as external grants or tuition fees, but exploring also alternative funding mechanisms, including partnerships, research grants, or commercial initiatives. Enhance succession planning. So smaller institutions should formalize policies for succession planning to reduce reliance on key individuals and ensure the continuity of operations. Strengthen risk management systems. So institutions must establish robust frameworks to identify, access, and mitigate risks. Increase transparency and accountability with clear documentation and dissemination of governance structures. And finally, align financial planning with strategic goals. So financial strategies should be integrated with institutional strategic plans. The third standard has to do with the design and approval of programs. So it emphasizes the need for institutions to have appropriate processes for the design, approval, and periodic review of academic programs. And these processes must ensure that these programs meet quality standards. Some of the strengths and good practices identified, first of all, was the fact that there was established approval mechanisms. So institutions follow well-structured approval processes that involve detailed program documentation. There was collaboration with external partners, so partnerships with external academic bodies or accrediting organizations enhanced the program credibility and quality. Alignment with learning outcomes. So many institutions ensure that programs are structured to meet clearly defined learning outcomes and incorporate both theoretical and practical skills. And there was also stakeholder input in the design. So in some institutions, not many, but some of them actively involve stakeholders such as industry representatives, employers, and alumni in the design of those of educational programs. Some of the weaknesses identified was sometimes in smaller institutions or newer institutions, a lack of internal expertise. So a lot of those institutions actually heavily rely on external bodies for program design and approval. Again, the insufficient stakeholder management, engagement actually from students and employers, insufficient stakeholder engagement, inadequate monitoring and review. In that sense, there needs to be continuous monitoring and periodic review of programs that are often underdeveloped. And a fourth thing was the limited innovation. So traditional program structures and teaching methods prevail in many institutions with limited exploration of interdisciplinary or modular approaches. And some recommendations for that would be for improvement, institutions should invest in training staff on program design and approval processes, so build the internal capacity, enhance the stakeholder engagements with involving stakeholders as students, alumni, industry representatives in the design and review of programs, strengthen monitoring and review systems. So institutions should implement robust systems for ongoing monitoring and periodic review of programs, encourage curriculum innovation. So in that sense, to stay competitive, institutions should explore innovative approaches such as interdisciplinary programs and flexible learning pathways, and align programs with strategic goals in the sense that program design should be closely linked to institutional strategic objectives. For standard number 4, which has to do with, it focuses on ensuring that institutions deliver programs in a manner that actively engages students in the learning process. So student-centered learning, teaching, and assessment. Some of the good practices identified is the diverse learning approaches. So institutions employ a variety of teaching methods, such as lectures, group discussions, project-based learning, and online tools, which is interesting. The second good practice was the clear and strength, let's say, in that standard was the clear assessment guidelines, so well-documented assessment protocols that ensure fairness, consistency, and alignment with learning outcomes. Responsible teaching practices, so faculty members often draw from professional experience to contextualize theoretical knowledge, which is something very useful also for the students. And accessible support systems, so many institutions provide academic resources such as tutoring, workshops on research and writing skills, and personalized academic support. Some of the weaknesses identified in the standard 4 was, again, I would say it's in a lot of standards we see that the limited student engagement. Even though we talk about student-centered learning, many institutions struggle to fully engage students in shaping their learning experience. There is a second weakness was the variability in feedback quality. So although feedback mechanisms are in place, their effectiveness varies, and students often report delays in receiving meaningful actionable feedback on their work. Resource constraints, so insufficient facilities such as limited group study spaces, underdeveloped virtual learning platforms that can hinder active participation and collaboration was another weakness, and inconsistent inclusivity. So not all institutions adequately address the diverse needs of students, particularly those with disabilities, non-traditional learners, or other that require flexible learning schedules. And for those weaknesses, some of the recommendations was first to enhance student involvement through formal structures, student councils, or advisory boards to gather regular feedback on teaching methods, improve the feedback mechanism, so develop clear guidelines to ensure timely, detailed, and actionable feedback, expand resources and facilities, so invest in physical, digital infrastructure, promote inclusive practices. Institutions should review policies and practices to ensure they accommodate diverse learning needs, and encourage innovation in teaching. Faculty should be encouraged to experiment with new teaching methods and technologies such as flipped classrooms, gamification, simulation tools, and other similar tools. Now, the fifth standard, the fifth of the 11 standard, has to do with admission, progression, recognition, and certification. It focuses on ensuring that institutions have clear, consistent, and transparent processes for student admission, progression, recognition, and certification. Some of the strengths identified was, first of all, the transparent admission processes. with clear and accessible information about admission requirements, comprehensive student induction. Institutions often offer detailed orientation programs for new students, introducing them actually to the institutional policies, robust progress monitoring, so regularly tracking of students' performance through academic advisors, alignment with qualification frameworks, so institutions ensure that their certifications processes meet the national and international standards, and the recognition of prior learning. So some institutions provide pathways for credit transfer, and recognition of prior learning enables students to build on their previous education and work experience respectively. Some of the weaknesses on Standard 5 and areas for improvement, there's limited flexibility in admission policies. So some stringent admission criteria at some institutions may unintentionally exclude capable non-traditional learners or international students sometimes who face unique challenges in meeting standardized requirements. There is a second weakness, the gaps in progression support. So while mechanisms for tracking students' progression exist, some institutions actually lack proactive support systems to address academic or personal challenges faced by students during their studies. Inconsistent feedback on certification processes. So sometimes the students often express concerns about the timeliness and clarity of certification processes, such as delays in issuing transcripts or certificates after the completion of their programs. Variable use of learning analytics. So the application of learning analytics to support student progression is uneven, with some institutions failing to leverage available data on that. And recognition and portability challenges. So despite alignment with qualifications frameworks, a few institutions face challenges in ensuring that their qualifications are widely recognized, particularly in international or niche professional markets. And for those weaknesses and, let's say, areas for improvement, some recommendations would be to enhance admission flexibility, strengthen progression support system, streamline certification processes, leverage learning analytics, and improve qualification recognition. So for the sixth standard, the teaching staff, which actually focuses on ensuring that institutions employ competent, qualified, and effective teaching staff. Some of the strengths and good practices is the transparent recruitment processes. So many institutions actually have clear criteria for recruiting teaching staffs, emphasizing qualification, professional experience, and subject matter exercise. Professional development opportunities. So institutions often provide training sessions, workshops, and opportunities for professional development. Integration of industry expertise. So many faculty members bring professional and industry-specific knowledge and experience. Regular performance appraisals. So institutions implement structured performance appraisals, often involving feedback from students, which is very important, peer reviews and self-assessments. Collaborative teaching practices. So faculty members are encouraged to work collaboratively through team teaching, sharing best practices. And some of the weaknesses is the over-reliance on part-time, on temporary staff on many institutions, on smaller actually, not in the majority of them, but smaller institutions, or those operating on constrained budgets. A second thing is inconsistent monitoring. So while professional development opportunities are offered, institutions often lack formal mechanisms to monitor participation and access the impact of these activities. Limited research engagement. So many teaching staff focuses primarily on instruction, on teaching, and not so much on research. And this research is something very important also for being high in the international academic rankings. Gaps in mentoring and support. So newer or less experienced teaching staff often lack access to structured mentorship programs. And finally, insufficient focus on pedagogical innovation that was highlighted in some reports. So some institutions lag in encouraging faculty to adopt innovative teaching methods, such as technology-enhanced learning, flipped classrooms, or interdisciplinary approaches. And through that, there were also specific recommendations on having diversified faculty contracts to have more full-time employees, formalize monitoring, encourage research integration, implement structured mentorship programs, and foster pedagogical innovation on that. The seventh standard has to do, emphasizes actually the importance of providing adequate resources and support system to ensure a quality learning environment. So learning resources and student support. So this includes facilities, technologies, academic resources, and personal support services to satisfy the needs of the diverse needs of students. Some of the good practices was comprehensive library and learning resources. So institutions typically provide well-equipped physical but also digital libraries, offering access to academic journals, ebooks, and other learning material. There is accessible digital infrastructure, which is another positive thing. Many institutions employ robust virtual learning environments and student information systems. Dedicated support services, so academic advising, career counseling, psychological support services are widely available, helping students to navigate the academic and personal challenges. Modern facilities, so classrooms and study spaces are frequently designed to create a conducive learning environment, but also flexible learning options, another strength on that. So to accommodate diverse student needs, institutions increasingly offer hybrid learning models, allowing students to participate in courses both on-site but also online. Some of the weaknesses in this specific standard would be the resource overcrowding. So growing student population often strain existing resources such as library seating, group workspaces, and access to computers, limiting their effectiveness due to the large number of students in relation to the facilities. So there's inconsistent technology integration on some institutions. So while digital tools are widely available, not all institutions integrate them fully into teaching and learning processes. Limited tailored support, so many institutions fall short in providing personalized support for students with unique needs, such as those with disabilities. Underdeveloped feedback mechanisms, so institutions often lack these systemic methods to collect and act on student feedbacks regarding the lack of specific resources, and also insufficient staff training, so academic and also administrative, mainly staff, that is also linked with this standard, may lack sometimes the training needed to effectively support students in using digital tools or navigating with resources. And recommendation of that would be to expand physical and digital infrastructure, so investing in expanding library capacity, study places, but also computer labs, develop comprehensive support services for students with specific needs, strengthen the feedback mechanisms, enhance staff training, and encourage research sharing and collaboration. The eighth of the 11th standards has to do with highlights actually the importance of institutions maintaining robust system for collecting, analyzing, and utilizing information to support effective management and decision making. Some of the strengths and good practices here would be the comprehensive data collection. So many institutions systematically collect data on student enrollment, performance, progression, and satisfaction. Good use of information systems, so student information systems and virtual learning environments are commonly employed to manage student data, monitor academic progress, and facilitate communications between students and staff. Monitoring and reporting, so institutions regularly monitor operational metrics and provide reports for internal stakeholders, ensuring transparency. And support for academic planning, so data management systems often assist in academic planning by tracking resource allocation, course enrollment needs, and program outcomes. Weaknesses identified in the standard 8 and standard number 8, information management. Many institutions struggle with fragmented data systems that lack integration, leading to inefficiencies in data retrieval and analysis. Sometimes there is underutilization of learning analytics, limited accessibility and training, so access to data systems and the ability to interpret them. Inadequate data security measures and feedback loops. By that we mean mechanisms for incorporating feedback from data analysis into institutional improvement are often weak. And there are related recommendations for integration of data systems, enhance use of analytics, expand data access and training, strengthen data securities, and develop feedback mechanisms. The ninth standard has to do with public information. So in that sense, it focuses on the obligation of institutions to provide clear, accurate, and accessible information about their activities, programs, policies, and outcomes. Some of the good practices and strengths identified was the comprehensive online presence. So many institutions maintain detailed websites and digital platforms that provide up-to-date information about program offerings, admission requirements, institutional policies. There is also accessible course information, so programs are often described with clear outlines, including entry requirements, learning outcomes, which is something very positive. Publications of key policies and reports. So institutions often publish policy documents, quality assurance reports, and also annual performance reviews. And there is also support for prospective students. So many institutions provide resources tailored for prospective students, including program brochures, virtual tours, frequently asked questions, and to make the decision of the applicants easier and provide them with more information. Some of the weaknesses identified on the public information standard, there is sometimes, in some cases, inconsistent information quality. So discrepancies are found between information providing on institutional websites and actual offerings on or policies. So that creates sometimes confusion. There's not always what is published on the website exactly what is the actual implementation that takes place in the higher education institution. There is limited details on student outcomes, so institutions often fail to provide comprehensive data on graduate employment rates, alumni achievements, or program success metrics. So also for future prospects of the students. Accessibility challenges, so not all institutions ensure that their public information is accessible to a diverse audience, so including individuals with disabilities or non-native language speakers. We have also identified, there was also identification of outdated content, so websites and promotional materials are sometimes not updated really regularly, and there is lack on feedback mechanisms, so few institutions provide opportunities for stakeholders to give feedback on the clarity, accuracy of this information. So in that sense, there were also some recommendations to expand, to ensure consistency and accuracy, expand outcome reporting, improve accessibility, to have regular content updates and develop feedback channels. Standard 10 has to do with ongoing monitoring and periodic review of programs. So emphasize the importance of regularly monitoring and reviewing academic programs to ensure they remain relevant, effective, and aligned with institutional goals and stakeholder needs. The strengths and weaknesses and good practices, strengths and good practices identified have to do with structured review cycles. So many institutions implement formal program review cycles, typically spanning 3 to 5 years, to assess curriculum relevance, teaching effectiveness, and alignment with strategic objectives. We have seen strategic stakeholder engagement on this specific standard. So some institutions involve external stakeholders such as employers, alumni, and graduates, industry representatives in program reviews. Data-driven decision-making. So institutions increasingly use data from student surveys in and course evaluations to inform program reviews and identify areas for improvement. There is alignment with accreditation standards. and action-oriented feedback loops. So in some cases, feedback from program reviews is systematically integrated into planning and resource allocation. And some weaknesses on and areas for improvement for standard 10, sort of inconsistent implementation. We could call it as not all programs undergo regular reviews, leading to disparities in qualities and relevance across departments or faculties. Limited use of comprehensive data. So while data collection is common, institutions often fail to use it effectively for in-depth analysis. There is also insufficient stakeholder representation. So student input and engagement from external stakeholders in program reviews in some institutions was a little bit limited. Reactive rather than proactive reviews. So program reviews often focus on addressing issues and not proactively identify future challenges. Gaps in documentations and follow-up. So some institutions lack clear documentation of review outcomes and follow-up actions. And recommendations for improvement here would be to standardize review processes, to enhance data utilization, expand stakeholder engagement, focus on proactive improvement, and document and communicate review outcomes. And lastly, since I want to be also precise on time, since there will be other presentations afterwards, for the 11th standard, the cyclical external quality assurance, it is a standard that emphasizes the necessity of institutions to undergo regular external quality assurance processes to validate the effectiveness of their internal quality systems. Some structured strengths and good practices would be the structured compliance with review cycles. So most institutions comply with the mandated cycles for external quality assurance reviews. There is a thorough self-assessment reports. So institutions often provide self-assessment reports during external reviews. There is stakeholder involvement, alignment with accreditation standards, and commitment to improvement with feedback from quality assurance, external quality assurance processes that often leads to tangible improvements in institutional policies. Some of the weaknesses is to be, we have identified, there was identification that there is more of a reactive than a proactive approach in many cases. So institutions sometimes view external quality assurance processes as compliance exercises rather than opportunities for meaningful improvement. So it's important also to be proactive sometimes. Inconsistent follow through on recommendations. So while external reviews generate actionable recommendations, sometimes institutions may lack clear mechanisms to implement and track these changes effectively. Limited integration with strategic goals. So external quality assurance outcomes are not always aligned with institutional strategic objectives. Preparation challenges. So some institutions face challenges in preparing for the external quality assurance, such as compiling comprehensive documentations for ensuring consistency in internal practices, and communication of outcomes. So institutions often do not effectively communicate the results of the external quality assurance processes to their stakeholders, reducing in this way transparency and engagement. And along with that would go some of the recommendations to adopt a proactive mindset, to enhance follow-through mechanisms, to align external quality assurance with strategic planning, strengthen the preparation process, but also improve communication of outcomes about these specific results. I think that there are even more detailed analysis on each of these strengths and weaknesses and recommendation on the final report. But I believe that through these presentations, you are able to see some of the good practices per standard, some of the areas for improvement and potential recommendations. So in that case, it could be a useful tool also for the authority to continuously improve all the standards, but also from the higher education institution and further education institutions to improve their whole approach focus on understand which are the good practices, understand also the areas for improvement, and continuously through adopting some of the recommendations to continuously improve, which is the actual goal that everybody has through this process. So thank you very much, and I hope it was interesting, and I tried to pretty much include all of the information in approximately half an hour, but so that you all have a picture of strengths, weaknesses, and recommendation for each specific standard. Thank you very much. Let me go. Let me just stop sharing.
Thank you for that presentation. It was very informative.
Thank you very much.
If anyone has any questions, you can write them down in the chat and we'll forward them to Dr. Vikas.
Thank you very much.
Yes, since we are a little bit running late. Okay.
If there are no other questions, we can stop for a short coffee break, and we will be back at
11:15.
11:15.
Welcome back after a short coffee break. I would like to thank Dr. Giannis Vikas for his well-detailed presentation. We will soon be uploading and publishing the actual report and we will also be disseminating the report to all providers. We are a little bit behind schedule. I would like now to invite Mr. Gino Schiavone, who was one of our VET experts this year, together with another Hungarian expert, Ms. Katalin, who have developed and worked on the new Further Education Institution Centers Accreditation Standards and Procedures. Today we are officially launching these standards that will come into force in October 2025. Gino, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello to everyone. So as I was introduced, I will be obviously delivering this presentation on the External Quality Assurance Provider Accreditation Manual for Further Education Institutions and Centers. So wait.
No.
Okay. So first I would like to say the introduction to these type of audits are crucial for maintaining and enhancing quality in Malta's further education sector, which MFHEA now are, as formerly said, separating the two from each other to ensure the compliance with the national standards and international best practices, and to promote continuous improvement, not just compliance, and to safeguard the learner outcomes. In this manner, we will be increasing more accountability and transparency. So the scope is to cover both the public and private further education institutions, the VET providers. With these evaluation areas, we will evaluate the governance, the teaching, the learner support, the staff development, and the facilities, and also to assess compliance with licensing and accreditation requirements as reflected in the manual, which we will give you a brief snapshot here in this presentation. So the guiding principles remain the independence and partiality, evidence-based solution from the institution side, their transparency in their outcomes, obviously any other collaborations with other institutions, and also to focus on continuous improvement. So the accreditation process is in two. those who are applying anew for an institution, a further institution, and therefore as an initial accreditation granted through a licensing process, and those who have been in the business after 5 years will be reaccredited, conducted obviously through an external audit every 5 years. And the key components for these two areas are both the self-assessment report, which is further explained in detail in the manual, the on-site visits and the peer reviews, and also the feedback and recommendations, all of which are explained in more detail in the manual, of course. Now, in this manual, for further separation from the further and the higher audits, we have chosen these 7 evaluation areas. We are calling them evaluation areas because we are going to look for effectiveness rather than just compliance. We would like to see, I will give an example, how effective what you are doing, because you can do something which you have been doing for a long time, but it is not effective. In reality, you would be complying to something which is to be done so, but it is not effective. So the evaluation areas that we have chosen is the first block is management, governance, and strategic planning. We left that together. The second block is quality assurance and enhancement. The third block is teaching and learning. And for those who have work-based learning, we have included this here. Now, work-based learning is a term which is very vast, comprehensive. So any type of work-based learning is included in this block. There is also the design development of programs, awards, and accreditation. The other block is student admission, progression, recognition, and certification. Another one which we brought together is data and information management. We did not separate this because we believe that data is also important for information management. And the last block is internationalization. Now, internationalization, it depends on the strategy of the provider. There is no one-size-fits-all. Internationalization can be internationalization of the content of the programs you are offering. It could be also internationalization of the human resources or internationalization of other activities that you provide. Could also be Erasmus exchanges. But that all depends how you explain that in your manual, in your policies and procedures, because the audits will concentrate exactly what you are referring to in that block of internationalization. The first 3 are regarded as very important. The others are important, but the first 3 obviously are actually the business of any educational institution. And as I said, we chose these areas and we call them evaluation areas because the word evaluation itself means you are checking how effective you are. As for example, if I take that you actually write a strategy, we want to know if this strategy is effective or not as you go along, because it can be a very well-written strategy, but obviously it stays on the paper and not very effective. Of course, these are explained in detail under 3 columns in the manual, because in the manual you will get exactly what is required in each of these evaluation areas, both at licensing stage and both at reaccreditation stage. So there is great help on the manual itself. And in the last column in the manual, you will see examples of evidence. But these are only examples because, as I said, there is no one-size-fits-all, and therefore it's up to you to bring the examples of evidence. In the accreditation procedures, the first point is to have the financial sustainability verified first. And as you will read in the manual, this is carried out, obviously, by a certified warranted accountant, which means that's the first step. Then there is an initial provider meeting where you are informed exactly of what is going to happen. And the MFHEA will propose the peer review panel for you to accept or maybe you have some comments about one of the peers that you would like to pass a comment before this is obviously rubber stamped for giving you the actual peers that will be carrying out the external audit. As you know, MFHEA will also send a questionnaire directly to the student body that you have when you are at re-accreditation stage, obviously, and they will obviously give the feedback directly to the MFHEA. The MFHEA will also do a meeting with the QA panel themselves with the peers in order to agree, obviously, of how things should develop step by step. And the MFHEA with the Q panel meeting then will obviously set the way forward. We have to remember that the provider in this case must submit a self-assessment report, an SAR. Now, we are binding that the institutions, the providers, do this on a yearly basis, an SAR on a yearly basis, but not necessarily to send it on a yearly basis to the MFHEA. They are bound only to send the fifth-year SAR to the MFHEA for the audit. However, MFHEA can reserve the right to ask for the former SARs. In reality, the providers will do good to do it yearly because like that, they can boast of their milestones on a yearly basis. And after, obviously, the SAR is done, a desk-based analysis takes place. And that is obviously the setting of the agenda between the MFHEA and the provider for the timeline, which is also explained in the manual in order to see how long it takes for this whole audit to take place, and that the preparation starts much before. So every audit will be 1 or more days for the review panel to evaluate providers' compliance with evaluation area according to the size of the institution and documents provided. And this is why we are saying the audit can take 1 or more days, but there is no one size that fits all again in the audits, which means it depends upon how big the provider is and obviously the documents provided to be able to evaluate the documents properly. One of the evaluation is obviously to see if the self-assessment report is a true picture, and some interviews are held to see that this is true of what is being said. And the interviews might include governing bodies, academic and administrative staff, students, graduates, and any third parties involved, plus a tour of the facilities. So basically, this is the post-EQA audit phase. There are conclusions and judgment based on the findings, and the judgments are of 4 types. The first one is fully compliant, and it is also explained what we mean by fully compliant in the manual. It could be substantially compliant, which means mostly you are compliant with some few recommendations. The other one is partially compliant, where you get a lot of recommendations in this area and you are a little bit far away from reaching the standard here. And the other one is totally non-compliant. Now, all these judgments will be given to each evaluation area, those 7 evaluation areas that you saw before. And therefore, you will have 7 judgments, 1 for each area. But those are the terms used for the judgment by the peer reviewers for every standard. When it comes to the report, the QA panel prepares the report as a draft to MFHEA after 7 weeks of the accreditation visit. The draft is sent to the Quality Assurance Committee then of MFHEA, and the final version will have to go to their board, the MFHEA board, for endorsement. And then the provider is obviously informed of the report. The provider will be required, after obviously there are no other issues on technical details or something similar, to make an action plan 7 weeks before the report is published on the MFHEA website. Now, the timeline is very well explained under 4.1.4. You will see the full time frame there, and you have 1 year after the provider must submit a follow-up report. So after the report is done, you will be expected to do a follow-up report after a year after it has been obviously published. So under 4.1.4 in the manual, you will get the full time frame, which will also be explained in the meetings between the MFHEA and the provider together. Now, there are some roles. These roles are also explained in the manual. There is the accreditation coordinator is a role in the MFHEA. So he is the one who's going to liaise with the institution facilitator. There is the peer review panel and obviously the authority itself, MFHEA. All these 4 roles, their duties, their roles are explained in this manual for smooth operation of the external quality audit. So, just to say a little bit more on the SAR, the self-assessment report, make sure that you identify the strengths and areas for improvement in the self-assessment report. At the end of the manual, there are clear guidelines for the providers of how to create the self-assessment report. You are then bound to provide the 5-year SAR and SAR on the 5th year because obviously the audit, the external audit will be happening. Now, the self-assessment report obviously must be honest and relevant to your institution. And most importantly, it must be supported by documentation in order to provide evidence that it is true and honest and relevant. And it not only includes a comprehensive description, the description is good of what is being done as activities and everything, but there needs to be a self-critical evaluation of the standards, the evaluation areas, those 7 which we have shown on these slides, but also found, of course, on the manual. So basically, the SAR structure will obviously have an introduction, a main body, and the annexes. Of course, there's much to do in the main body. And it must be submitted electronically. You have to make sure the self-assessment report is not done by one person. It must be done through a contribution of all necessary stakeholders, perhaps written by a person, but after going through with all the necessary stakeholders, internal and external, in order to write this self-assessment report. This is my brief presentation to you. I thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gino. Very well detailed and explained, as always. I would like to remind you that these standards apply from October 2025. So I would encourage all further education institutions to start thinking and planning how to start developing their IQA and their internal procedures. The audits that will start in October 2025, after 1st October 2025, will start with these new procedures. Next year, yes, like we did this year, for the new higher education accreditation standards, we will provide support and training to further education institutions, but once again, we encourage you to invest heavily in quality assurance. At the end of the day, as we have always said from, I think, the inception of this authority, providers are the first and foremost responsible for their internal quality assurances. Now, are there any questions which maybe you would like to ask to Gino, to our expert? Does this include? Yes.
This manual is for the further education institutions and centers, but those who are further and higher, this will not apply. The higher education, then manual applies. So to make it clear, this manual only applies for the further education institutions. I repeat, those institutions which are further and higher will have the higher standards to apply. Yes, correct, Mohammed. We have all those in all the areas because it starts from the strategy. We will understand if the strategy is already relevant because we will see what has been done before to write it during and after. The impact and the efficiency, obviously you will report yourself in the end. That's why we are saying you should do a yearly SAR. It will benefit you more than anything to show the milestones that you are doing. And yes, you can do something which is effective, but which is of the past and not for today's world. And therefore, we expect, obviously, that the strategy is looking forward and not backwards. From the very instance of the strategy, the management itself, the policies and procedures you have, and also the type of organigram that you have, all will indicate the relevance, the impact, and the efficiency. This is like one cake. There are a lot of ingredients in it. We are saying effective in the sense, like I bring an example, you do some research, the output is the pill. The pill doesn't save lives, therefore it's not effective. But if we want it to be effective, the pill, the outcome must be saving lives. And therefore the end is very important because at the end of the day, our business is teaching and learning, and we are preparing students for tomorrow's world.
Okay. Yes.
The form for self-evaluation, if I'm understanding you well, is how you build the self-assessment report. In that case, the manual has it, and there is also a similar one online for the higher education, where you also get that after each evaluation area, you will need to put the strengths, the weaknesses, etc.
And I would like to add, to remind you that last year, during a similar webinar, we have launched an e-tool for self-assessment. Now that obviously we'll have to develop one for the further, and we should update that for the higher. So that helps you. It's available. It's online on our website, on the resources section. But yes, definitely we will develop a self-assessment report template to help you develop this very important document. Are there any more questions? If there are no more questions on this topic, we shall proceed to the last presentation of this webinar. Today we are launching also the new guidelines, quality assurance guidelines of WIMFIL centers. We have present here Mr. Jesmond Atkins, who is our local WIMFIL expert, and online Dr. Mariana Makela, who is from the University of Hagahelia in Finland, who also contributed with Mr. Atkins as a WIMFIL expert to develop these guidelines. Mr. Atkins and Dr. Makela, the floor is yours to present to the general public, to the public, these guidelines that come into effect, as already we have communicated, as from 1st January 2025.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Good morning to all. Let me start with the introduction. Probably some of you are already aware what is VIMFIL. VIMFIL is another form of assessment, validation of informal and non-formal learning, which identifies and assesses, formally acknowledges regarding skills, competence that candidates and individuals can develop through their life by participation in non-formal and informal learning. So what does informal and non-formal learning mean? It means that learning might have taken place during various contexts for lifelong and life-wide learning, including experiential learning under different settings outside formal education. We know, for instance, nowadays, we are looking much forward to micro-credentials, but we'll continue to discuss on that later on. VIMFIL falls under the remit of Malta Further and Higher Education Authority, which is obviously part of the Ministry of Education and Employment. Oops. So what are the benefits? The benefits are, I would say, quite a few. VIMFIL may be used to compare the knowledge, skills and competence that could have been obtained towards also intended learning outcomes of formal learning settings. For instance, a degree, any type of other qualification, and certificates, of course. It might help also as a benefit for an admission to progress, which may include the mapping to meet the entrance requirements for admission into a program of study. Also, we know that VIMFIL is a flexible study pathway which enables candidates to gain credits or for study units or qualifications, therefore shortening the time and period of study through collection of evidence and the assessment that may take place. Marianna?
Yes, thank you, Jesmond, and good morning, everyone. And thank you for inviting me both for this project and for this event today. So I'm sorry for my voice. I have a little bit of a cold, so I hope you can bear with my talking. So to continue on the benefits of validation, non-formal and informal learning. So Jesmond already mentioned the kind of a more administrative component of the benefits, but there is also another very important component in the benefits, and I would say that they are on the human scale, so to say. So the validation of non-formal and informal learning that increases the candidate's self-esteem and improves the confidence because they are able to get their achievements and transferable skills and competencies recognized and validated. So there is someone that they get credit for, and also credits in a very concrete sense in terms of advancement. So that is something that really increases the self-esteem and self-assurance and also motivation of the person who who undergoes this process. So moreover, it enables the further seeking of personal goals and objectives. So it kind of structures and provides more structure for all those endeavors in one's personal life and in one's professional life for continuous learning, lifelong learning, and also in employment. So it facilitates the planning and seeking of the new opportunities and career development at one's workplace, so in the current environment, and also it provides opportunities to seek further learning pathways by getting one's skills and competencies recognized, because they can be mapped towards existing job opportunities also elsewhere by these acknowledgements of the strengths and weaknesses. So it is a very versatile, how would I say, ecosystem in all. So I think Jesmond, you can take it from here.
Okay, what VIMFIL principles? Actually, there are four main principles which VIMFIL is based upon, and it's not just in Malta. In fact, there was the need to introduce validation of non-formal and informal learning. Assessment has been long discussed at European level, to address and recognize learning obtained across different contexts, including environments and through different learning forms. The development was triggered by the need to facilitate migration of skilled and competent laborers within the European communities, states, even locally between one company and another, based upon the parity of esteem, which is very important, between formal education, learning and non-formal and informal learning settings. In fact, the main 4 principles are based upon the European Centre for Development of Vocational Training, CEDEFOP, which has played an important role to develop and implement EU vocational training policies. The 4 main principles are based on the process of identification, which we will explain, Mariana will explain as well, documentation, assessment, and certification.
Yes, thank you. So the first step of this very structured and clear process is the identification of needs. So the validation assessment centers, of course, have a very strong role in here, and that is also why these guidelines for quality assurance have been established and developed for them, so that they would be better equipped to meet all these diverse needs and expectations of the people who are seeking for validation of non-formal and informal learning. So they need to maintain a very candidate-centered approach. So we always need to place the candidates and the learner at the center of these kind of processes. And the centers would themselves provide all the information and guidance to candidates. So there is a lot of different types of questions that the centers will face coming from the part of the candidates. And they should be well equipped to address all these needs. So the candidates may wish to apply to be assessed on their knowledge, skills, and competencies. That is, of course, the main part of the process. And those competencies and skills and knowledge may stem from either lifelong learning environments, from including work experience and or different kinds of training provided. But as said, they are not something that would be generated by the context of formal learning environments. The candidates may wish to identify existing gaps in knowledge. So it's not just of being assessed on what they are capable of doing and what their competencies are, but also how to be better informed on the gaps that exist in terms of those competencies and skills. And they can be very sector specific and job position specific. And that is also why we need very solid identification processes and also documents in the centers. The candidates wish to achieve further education to address any skills gaps. So that is also something that they are participating in this process for. So not just being assessed, but by having more information on the education opportunities that they may have. And then after this initial assessment and mapping, they are able to apply for those validation assessments that are that will be undertaking in their specific situation. So that was the first part of the process. And Jesmond, if you can put the second slide. So after the identification, we need a lot of documentation and also a process for compiling all that documentation. And that is the second phase, and also very important. And those all the phases of the process are obviously entwined, and they build on each other. And the documentation is, of course, very important to ensure the quality assurance part and the fairness and transparency of the candidate's assessment. So this is something that needs to be very structured and very transparent and very equitable also. In a candidate-centered approach, of course, as said, the candidates must be at the center, and they will be given the opportunity and also guided throughout all these opportunities to fast track, skip, or bypass through self-assessment any knowledge, skills, or competence that they may already have obtained, so that they will be better equipped also of assessing themselves their current competencies. And then they will be able to, as a first and second step, to apply to be assessed on any knowledge, skills or competencies where there are skills gaps or needs of further competence. And once again, these may be very job specific and sector specific. So identification of all those needs is very important. And then we come to the third phase, which is the assessment part. And that is something where the centers have a very active role. And of course, this is something which more or less forms the core of the whole process. So the first and the second parts are more or less preparing for this assessment phase. And the assessment process needs to be based, once again, on a very candidate-centered approach. And it should be designed around the candidate's needs, depending on what the candidate has learned or achieved in terms of knowledge, skills, and competencies. So once again, this is something which is more or less customized and tailor-made, even though we have a standard process, but it can be then implemented in different ways in terms of and in function of the individual situations of the learners slash candidates. And they have to be based on the national occupational standards. So this is a very strong tool in this process. So once the national occupational standards are clear and explicit, so it will be also easier for the candidates to navigate across them and to self-assess and then be assessed by the centers. So the assessment is a continuous link to identification and documentation phases. So it's all in interconnection. And it provides a solid foundation for the assessments to ensure quality, fairness, and transparency. So I really would like to emphasize these components of the process. And then I think that there was one slide more on the assessment. So the candidates will be provided with assessment feedback also. So if the process doesn't stop at the tests or demonstrations of skills, but there will always be a feedback whether their knowledge and skills and competencies have been achieved successfully or not, and where there are gaps, if there are any. So the feedback is a very important component of the process. And the feedback should include information on any gaps or knowledge, skills and competencies, so that have been identified that a candidate may wish or may not wish, but in case there is a wish to have training for, so then there should be also guidance for this training. So how to address those gaps and how to reapply for another assessment at a reasonable extra cost. So all these parts will be clearly explained to the candidate. So it is a very important job that the validation centers will be undertaking. And Jesmond, you will take it from here.
Fourth principle is certification. This is obviously the most, I would say, the most important principle for candidates who are applying to take validation assessments. In fact, it's the final process, and this is a rewarding stage for the successful achievement of the knowledge, skills, and competencies required for a job title, whether it's in a trade sector, okay, which have applied to be assessed for. Certification is then given to the candidate, showing the candidate's competence for prospective employers, seeking competent employees that may ensure quality work, safety adherence, and also good practices in their employment. In fact, in the quality manual that myself and Dr. Mariana have prepared, the guidelines are quite clear of what should a validation center have as a quality assurance, both internal quality assurance and both external. And this will facilitate the role of the VINFIL center to have every documentation in place. And why? Because even certification, it is listed that a validation assessment center will issue the certification, based upon from which validation center that certificate has been issued. Why? And this is very important because now we have more than just one validation center in the same sectors. So it is important, even for national statistical data, all right, it is important to know where candidates, though it has to remain confidential, all right, to the candidates under obviously the GDPR rule, okay? So the government as well, from time to time, might ask MFHEA statistical data of how many have applied, how many have failed, through which training centers, etc. But those are clearly explained also in the training quality assurance manual, which was based upon the document that we have prepared in September 2022, where it was clear what we're looking forward to ensure quality assurance throughout all VIMFIL centers. Achievements from MFHEA, and both myself, Mariana, and MFHEA have been working to promote, this is important, the promotion of parity of esteem. We know that we have flexible pathways that some candidates may go through formal education, but we know also that there are a lot of candidates out there which have the necessary competence, but probably they don't have the necessary knowledge. And this can obviously get a parity of esteem to have some form of certification to identify that prospective employee as being a potential, especially in the vet sector, all right, employee within. As you can see, a consultation meeting was held with stakeholders this year on 4th of October, 2024, where we have discussed with all stakeholders the quality assurance manual, guideline manual. For them, we took upon also some suggestions, which myself, Mariana, and MFHEA have been working upon. Consultation was to be given by end of October. We did have, and we did do some final adjustments to the final document, which was, I would say, very minor, but we did listen to those feedback, which we have adjusted. And as you well know today, it's the launching of the final quality manual guidelines today, night of December 2024. It's good to mention that as from January 2025, VIMFIL centers will have visits from officers to ensure that these quality assurance guidelines are being followed. But also MFHEA is ready to provide the necessary help to be able to finally abide by these quality assurance guidelines. Any questions, maybe to myself, Mariana, or?
Yeah. Thank you, Jesmond and Mariana. Are there any questions? It seems that we do not have any questions on these guidelines that will come into effect as from January 2025. We will be publishing also an official communication. Okay, there are no questions, and so we come to the conclusion of this webinar. First of all, I would like to thank all participants, all those who have attended. As you can see, we have managed to have another eventful year of activities and tasks which we have planned and we successfully have delivered. This wouldn't have been possible, I repeat once again, and I would like to thank all the members of staff within the accreditation, quality assurance and validation unit. A major milestone this year was the setting up, finally, I would say, of a formal validation unit. I would like to thank all our experts, Dr. Vikas, Mr. Schiavone, Ms. Catalin, that unfortunately she is indisposed, Jesmond, Mariana, for all their support throughout this year. Now, looking forward to 2025, we already have submitted to UPA, which once again, I would like to thank all their members of staff for their support in this project and other projects that we have. But yes, we have submitted now a work plan for 2025. And very briefly, I will explain to you what will the authority is planning to do in the coming now 12 months. Following the publication of the new further education accreditation standards, next year, as I mentioned before, we'll be giving training on each and every evaluation area. There are 7, and as we did this year, there will be workshops for those who are interested to develop further their insights on QA. Also next year now, the next step is to start drafting new procedures for program accreditation of further education up to MQF level 4. Currently we have a system where it's practically the same procedure, but as you know also, we have already issued, and we will finalize it in March, the new higher education program accreditation standards. So next year, concurrently, there will be a draft document on the further education programs, how they should be submitted, and standards. Also, we will be updating, we'll be publishing them in June 2025, RPL guidelines. These have been issued in 2020, and we are in the process of updating. It's a consultative process ongoing right now, the recognition of prior learning guidelines. Also, next year, we will start the update of the work-based learning guidelines, which have been issued 2-3 years ago. We shall also finalize the online teaching and learning QA regulations. We started the process, let's say in summer, but last Friday we have launched these programs. And finally, I would like to thank you, all providers and our stakeholders, including students, I would say. At the end of the day, we are here for them, for their cooperation and help throughout this journey. We have managed to achieve what we've done till now, also thanks to your cooperation. This webinar comes to an end now. I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of MFHEA and all staff to wish you all a very happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year 2025. Thank you very much.